Welcome to the political panel. We're talking about Bill 52, an amendment to the Education Act which would refine the education system's approach in dealing with students who bully others. And joining me now, New Brunswick Social Development Minister Kelly Lamrock, the Conservative Justice critic Jody Carr, NDP leader Roger Duguay, and Green Party leader Jack McDougall. Welcome to you all. Mr. Lamrock, do we need the legislation regarding bullying in the school system changed?
We need to make a lot of changes, no question. And I think people do want some tough questions answered even better than they have been in the past. Why do these so often does bullying go unreported? How do we make it easier for kids to report? How do we support kids and intervene early? How do we measure the problem and hold schools accountable? Right. All have to be changed. And what I found is there has been sort of two disparate reactions. People were first calling me a lot saying, well, surely we're going to do something. And then when they find out that the bill in question says, well, bullying carries suspension. In French and English it says, it's only suspension is the only option listed. And then they say, well, hang on a second, we don't want mandatory suspensions. This is probably a more complex problem than kind of the right-wing U.S. Republican approach of just saying, look, suspend them all. And the idea of a 7 or 8-year-old who makes a mistake for the first time being suspended because the principal has no discretion. We know in our experience that policy leads to more bullying because kids don't get help. And often people don't report minor incidents because they don't want to see people suspended. So I think Minister Hachey's announcement today of having a bullying summit, because, we've seen groups like the New Brunswick Teachers Association, the chair of one of the largest DECs came out today, the principal at Leo Hayes have all said, whoa, this bill shouldn't be passed. But that doesn't mean do nothing. So I think his announcement today to assemble actual student council leaders, their representatives on DECs, since we allow that now, teacher representatives, principals, and to have a summit this spring about how we do better. I think to consult some of the people who weren't consulted when Mr. Allward wrote this bill, but to insist on change is the right balance.
Right-wing Republican approach?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, I have to disagree with Mr. Lamrock, respectfully, my friend. The bill very clearly defines bullying and harassment into law. It gives discretion for suspension. The wording incorrectly mentioned, the wording is cause for suspension. And also it gives mandate for education awareness programs to deal with bullying. We have actually, CBC themselves have talked to a law professor that agrees with the bill in terms of it being a discretionary measure. I even went as far this week to contact a lawyer in Toronto well-known who could read this, and they said that it is discretion. It's not a mandatory Republican measure here. But what it does do, it elevates the seriousness of the issue of bullying and harassment into legislation. It says that we will have respect and tolerance, and that bullying is not acceptable in our schools. And furthermore, we're always been open to improvements in some of the wording if it requires a few wording changes, but the government refuses to even discuss this bill in committee in the legislature. And what we're really pleased with is, at the very, very least, it's raised and helped raise awareness, and that's one thing we're happy with.
Gentlemen, and I say this in all seriousness, you're both pretty bright guys. How is it that the two of you can sit there looking at the same piece of legislation and have entirely opposed interpretations of what it says?
Well, I've gone to the lawyers and the professor that I'm referring to and the research that we've done. And again, I've said it's not a perfect legislation by any means. It doesn't say one-time event. It says chronic and systematically. And also, we're open to improvements.
Okay, let me just stop you there.
Yeah.
Okay, so and how are you explaining your position?
Look, a lot of this comes from probably the fact the opposition, and this was true when we were doing it too, has to draft their own bills. And that's why I look, at second reading, we were saying, look, why don't we work together on this? I think when you see lines like in French, and Roger uniquely could back me up on this, we say, le taxage emporte une suspension. It doesn't say can carry suspension. It doesn't say could provide grounds. It doesn't identify principals as having discretion. And indeed, the legal counsel, we have the other reason you don't put it in the Act is that would make it a provincial offense and could criminalize it. But I don't think these technical grounds are what people want to hear us bicker about. If Jody says that's not our intention, I take him at his word. I think the broader issue is, though you have had now heads of district councils, student council leaders who are actually in the system and not former students, and teachers say, wait a minute, we weren't consulted, and this bill as drafted gives us a lot of concerns, and we don't even believe we should put it in the Act because it could take away our discretion. So let's follow Minister Hachey's suggestion. Let's have a summit and let's deal with things that aren't even talked about in the bill, like easier reporting, holding schools accountable, proper resources, counseling, and training, frankly, for teachers to spot things. And I think there's a lot of common ground there, and
that should happen.
maybe something good can come out of this.
Okay, Mr. Duguay, what's the NDP view of this issue? What do you think needs to be done?
I'll talk as a leader of a party, but also as a supply teacher. And I do that, and I did that for the last 5 years as a supply teacher, sometime almost full-time. But I think it's a need. We need a legislation in New Brunswick to do something, because very often what I hear is students have all the rights and teachers have no rights, you know. And I think something have to be done around that. And what I feel sad is, okay, tomorrow the legislature will be shut down, and I think it's a very important issue. Maybe for Mr. Graham it's not so important, but I think it is a very important. That's why it should be the session should go longer to discuss around any issue like that, because the situation, I can't talk about the whole province, but in my area it is very serious. And when I look at that, and we know the Conservative, they push the bill and this and that, but you know, what I feel sad is the problem still throughout the province, in school, and still there. And the situation we are in, okay, Minister of Education announced a summit for this spring, but, you know, we know we are in election year, and next year will fix the problem in our school? I'm not convinced. If I look on other issues we discussed in our province for the last 3 years and a half, and also I'm sure the Conservative are in favor of a legislation, but they had 7 years to do something, but we almost hear nothing about that. Okay. But it's an emergency. We are in election year. Everybody hurry. But this situation, I think, if we don't take it seriously, will stay the same.
Kelly, I'll let you respond
I guess
to that.
only I would just say this, and I think if you had us all over a beer, we would probably announce, I don't think there's anyone at this table who hasn't proven their props in terms of caring about kids. There's dads and teachers here. I think probably, so it doesn't get lost in election year politics, let's acknowledge two things. One is, I don't think this is an issue that lends itself to the grand gesture. Bullying's already against the rules and everyone knows it, but it goes underreported, often under-resourced. People aren't always trained to deal with it well. Schools aren't held accountable, and I think like anything where you have a rule that's continuously being broken, repeating the rule isn't probably the issue. If we could pass a law making kids all love each other, frankly, if we could make adults all treat each other decently, we'd all sign it.
That would be the end of the political panel.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And so I don't think it's a law. I think it is about some of, and Roger's right. I think we have to be very careful here not to play election year politics with this and say, well, this is the idea. I don't think there's a magic elixir. And
there's not a one-fix-all
for
this issue, but legislation will help the situation. It raises the seriousness of it. And, you know, the government just did a consultation on the existing policy 703 and made changes last December. And it's refreshing to know that they're now open to do more consultation to improve those regulations. And I think we can't turn that down. We have to give those opportunities. But like Roger said, let's get this right. Let's take it serious.
Jack, I'm not inviting you to be cynical, but the call for a bullying summit, I mean, is that just politically expedient, or?
It has the danger of being. I was not confused but conflicted by the question myself as well. I agree. Everyone is against bullying. There's nobody, I haven't heard anybody speak up for it. And bullying now takes on such a new ugly face with the tools that are in front of us. You know, I was watching Dancing with the Stars and a number of very, very popular programs which really legitimize rudeness, incredible rudeness. You suck, you know, people telling people who try 100%. You see this on Facebook, on Twitter, on all sorts of these social media now that rudeness has become the norm. Look at our legislature. I mean, we had bullying in the legislature. We had someone physically go after the Speaker of the House. We had somebody present one of their fingers to an opposition member. We've